Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And this time, we are exploring Taoism, but taking a slightly less traveled path to do so. You might be familiar with Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi, but we're focusing on Lai Zi, a figure who presents a uniquely practical approach to Taoist principles.
That's right.
Our source material comes from an episode of Praxis Sophia, a channel focused on practical knowledge for a good life. And they make a great case for why Lai Zi's wisdom is especially relevant in our modern world. What do you think?
Yeah. Lai Zi's teachings are almost like Taoism distilled for daily living. It's less about abstract concepts and more about navigating the challenges of everyday existence.
Yeah, there's something really appealing about the straightforward style of Lai Zi.
Absolutely. It's very direct and less shrouded in that poetic mystery, which can make it more accessible, for people who are seeking practical guidance.
So before we get into, his ideas, let's set the scene. The Praxis Sophia episode tells us Lai Zi supposedly lived during the Warring States period in China, sometime between the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. And that was a time of intense social and political upheaval.
Absolutely. It was a period marked by constant conflict and shifting alliances. But amidst that chaos, there was also a flourishing of philosophical thought, Confucianism, Mohism, and of course, Taoism.
And Lai Zi emerges right in the midst of it all, offering his perspective on how to navigate such turbulent times.
Yes. But there's a fascinating layer to this. Lai Zi's historical existence is actually a subject of debate among scholars. Some believe he may be more of a legendary figure, embodying certain ideals rather than a confirmed historical person.
It's almost as if he's this enigmatic figure whose wisdom has just been passed down through generations.
Exactly. And even his main work, the text also called Lai Zi, might have been compiled centuries after he supposedly lived, so we're dealing with a bit of a mystery.
A mystery that I find even more intriguing now. But that doesn't diminish the value of the ideas attributed to him, right?
Not at all. Whether Lai Zi was a real person or a composite figure, the teachings attributed to him in the Lai Zi text offer profound insights into navigating life's complexities.
So instead of getting lost in the historical debate, I think it's more beneficial for us to focus on the practical application of Lai Zi's philosophy. Would you agree?
I agree. The Praxis Sophia episode does a great job of highlighting some of Lai Zi's core concepts that feel particularly relevant to us today.
Let's start with this idea of emptiness. It's a concept we hear a lot in Eastern philosophies, but I'm curious to hear how Lai Zi approaches it.
Yeah, he presents it not as a void or a lack of something, but rather as an open and receptive state of mind.
So instead of being a negative thing, it's actually about having a flexible and adaptable mindset.
Precisely. It's about letting go of rigid thinking and being open to the ever-changing nature of reality.
I can already see how this would be valuable in today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with information and things change so rapidly.
Absolutely. Lai Zi recognized that clinging to fixed ideas and trying to control everything only leads to frustration and suffering. He encourages us to cultivate this emptiness as a way to navigate the inevitable uncertainties of life.
So how does he suggest we cultivate this emptiness? Is it something that you can actively practice?
There are definitely practices associated with cultivating emptiness. Meditation, for instance, is a common technique for quieting the mind and creating space for greater awareness.
That makes sense. I can see how meditation could help you let go of those constant thoughts and worries that keep you from being fully present.
Exactly. And mindfulness practices in general can be helpful, paying attention to your thoughts and emotions without judgment, simply observing them as they arise and pass away.
So it's about becoming more aware of your inner state and creating a sense of spaciousness within yourself.
Yes, and from that spaciousness can come a greater sense of peace and equanimity, even in the face of challenging circumstances.
It sounds like cultivating emptiness could be a powerful tool for managing stress and anxiety, something many of us struggle with today.
Absolutely. It's not about becoming emotionless or indifferent, but rather developing a greater capacity to observe and accept your experiences without getting swept away by them.
I'm really starting to grasp the practical implications of this concept. It's not just an abstract philosophical idea, but something that can be applied in your everyday life.
Exactly. And Lai Zi provides a lot of guidance on how to actually integrate these principles into your daily experience.
Well, I'm eager to learn more. What other practical wisdom does Lai Zi offer for navigating the ups and downs of life?
Another key concept he emphasizes, effortless action, often referred to as Wu Wei in Taoism.
I've heard of Wu Wei before, but I admit it's always felt a bit paradoxical to me. How can you act without effort?
It's not about becoming passive or inactive, but rather about aligning your actions with the natural flow of life.
So instead of forcing things or swimming upstream, it's about finding a way to move with the current.
That's a great analogy. Think of it as understanding the natural order of things and working with it, rather than exhausting yourself trying to impose your will upon the world.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this concept could be incredibly valuable in our modern world, where we often feel pressured to constantly strive and control every aspect of our lives.
Lai Zi suggests that this relentless striving is often counterproductive and leads to more stress and anxiety. He encourages us to cultivate a sense of ease and effortlessness in our actions, trusting that things will unfold as they should.
Prex Sophia actually shared a great story from the Lai Zi that illustrates this concept perfectly. It involved Confucius observing a skilled swimmer navigating a raging river with incredible ease.
Ah, yes. That story is a classic example of how Wu Wei can be applied in a very literal sense.
Yeah, Confucius, being Confucius, is amazed by the swimmer's skill and asks him how he manages to navigate such dangerous currents so effortlessly. And the swimmer's response is essentially, "I don't fight the current, I move with it."
It's such a powerful metaphor for how we can approach life's challenges. Instead of resisting or trying to force things to go our way, we can learn to adapt and flow with the circumstances, finding a path of least resistance.
This really resonates with me. I can think of so many situations where I've wasted energy trying to control outcomes that were ultimately beyond my control.
It's a common human tendency, but Lai Zi encourages us to question that need for control and to consider a different approach.
So how can we apply this idea of Wu in a more practical sense? What does it look like to act with effortless action in our daily lives?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of when you're trying to force things or resist what is.
So noticing those moments when you're pushing too hard or getting caught up in a struggle.
Exactly. And then instead of trying to overpower the situation, ask yourself, what would it look like to move with the current here? How can I adapt my actions to align with the natural flow of events?
It almost sounds like a form of surrender, but not in a passive or defeatist way.
More like a conscious choice to let go of the need to control everything and to trust that there's a wisdom in allowing things to unfold naturally.
This raises an interesting question for me. Doesn't letting go sometimes feel like giving up?
That's a common concern, but Lai Zi makes a distinction between letting go of attachment to outcomes and giving up on your goals altogether.
So you can still have aspirations and take action toward them, but without being rigidly attached to a specific outcome.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between effort and ease, action and allowing.
That's a nuanced perspective, and I appreciate you clarifying that. I can definitely see how holding on to that need for control can lead to unnecessary stress and disappointment.
It can also prevent us from seeing new possibilities or opportunities that might emerge when we loosen our grip on how things should be.
So embracing Wu Wei could actually open us up to more creative solutions and unexpected paths.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating a sense of flexibility and adaptability, allowing yourself to be guided by the circumstances rather than rigidly adhering to a preconceived plan.
This concept of effortless action is really resonating with me. I'm starting to see how it could be a powerful antidote to the constant pressure and striving that we often experience in modern life.
It's a practice, of course, and it doesn't mean that life will suddenly become effortless. But by cultivating this awareness and shifting our perspective, we can find more ease and flow in how we approach challenges and navigate the complexities of life.
Before we move on, I'd like to revisit the idea of emptiness for a moment. We talked about how it can help us deal with stress and uncertainty, but I'm curious to know how it connects to Wu Wei. Are these concepts related in some way?
They're absolutely interconnected. You could say that cultivating emptiness is a prerequisite for practicing Wu Wei.
Oh, so?
When your mind is cluttered with thoughts, worries, and rigid ideas about how things should be, it's difficult to act with effortless action.
Because you're constantly fighting against the current of your own thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. But when you cultivate emptiness, you create space for a more intuitive and responsive way of being. You're less likely to react impulsively or get caught up in resistance.
So by quieting the mind and letting go of those rigid attachments, you create a more fertile ground for effortless action to emerge.
Precisely. It's like clearing the path for a more natural and harmonious way of moving through the world.
That makes a lot of sense. It's as if emptiness is the foundation upon which effortless action can flourish.
That's a great way to put it. And as we delve deeper into Lizi's teachings, we'll see how these concepts intertwine and support each other in creating a more balanced and fulfilling way of life.
Well, I'm ready to keep exploring. What other insights from Lizi should we unpack?
Lizi also explores the idea of the relativity of perception, which has profound implications for how we interpret our experiences.
I'm intrigued. What does he mean by the relativity of perception? And how does it apply to navigating modern life?
He suggests that our perceptions are not always an accurate reflection of reality. What we see as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, is often shaped by our limited perspective and preconceived notions.
So it's about recognizing that there might be more to a situation than meets the eye.
Exactly. And one of the best examples of this is the classic Lizi story of the old man who lost his horse.
Ah, yes. Praxis Sophia mentioned this story as well. It's a great illustration of how what appears to be bad luck can actually lead to unexpected benefits.
It's a story about shifting perspectives and recognizing that we rarely have the full picture.
I'd love for you to recount that story for our listeners.
Of course. So the story goes like this. There was an old man living on the border of a frontier province. He was considered by his neighbors to be very lucky, as he had a fine stallion that everyone admired.
I bet everyone in the village wanted a horse like that.
They certainly did. But one day, the stallion ran off and disappeared across the border. The old man's neighbors, thinking they were being kind, came to offer their condolences, saying, "Such bad luck to lose your only horse."
It seems like a natural reaction. Losing your only horse, especially in those times, would have been a huge blow.
It certainly would have, but the old man simply replied, "Who knows what is good or bad?"
Wow, what a response. He doesn't seem fazed at all by what others perceive as a misfortune.
Not at all. A few months later, the stallion returned, bringing with him a magnificent wild mare from across the border.
So not only did his horse come back, but it brought a bonus.
Exactly. Now, the old man had 2 fine horses, and the villagers, seeing this turn of events, said, "What wonderful luck you have."
I can imagine the villagers were now quite envious of the old man's fortune.
They certainly were. But again, the old man replied, "Who knows what is good or bad?"
He's sticking to his philosophy, refusing to get caught up in the judgments of good and bad luck.
And here's where the story takes another turn. The old man's son, excited about the new mare, decides to try and break her in. But the mare throws him off and he breaks his leg.
Oh no, so what seemed like good fortune quickly turns sour.
Yes. And once again, the villagers came to offer their condolences, saying, "Such terrible luck to have your son injured."
I'm sensing a pattern here.
You're catching on, and you can probably guess the old man's response.
Let me guess. Who knows what is good or bad?
Exactly. He refused to be swayed by the fluctuating opinions of others. He understood that events are rarely inherently good or bad. They simply are.
There's such wisdom in that perspective.
There is, and the story doesn't end there. Shortly after the son's injury, the army comes through the village, conscripting all the young men to fight in a war.
Oh, this is where the old man's son's broken leg becomes a stroke of good luck, right?
You got it. Because of his injury, the son is spared from being sent to war, and many of the other young men from the village do not return.
The old man's unwavering acceptance of whatever life threw at him, without labeling it as good or bad, ultimately protected his son.
Exactly. And the story highlights Lai Zai's message that judging events as good or bad is often a trap. It's our limited perspective that creates the illusion of good and bad luck.
So the real lesson here is to detach from those judgments and accept that we rarely have the full picture.
Precisely. And this acceptance can lead to a greater sense of peace and equanimity in the face of life's inevitable ups and downs.
This story is so relevant to our modern lives. We often get caught up in labeling things as good or bad, successes or failures, without realizing how those judgments might be clouding our perception.
Absolutely, and the story encourages us to pause before making those judgments, to consider the possibility that things might not be as they seem.
I'm curious to hear how we can apply this wisdom to our own lives.
Right.
Do you have any suggestions for how we can start to shift our perspectives and avoid those knee-jerk reactions of labeling everything as good or bad?
One practical approach is to simply become more aware of your judgments. Notice when you're labeling something as good or bad and ask yourself, is this judgment based on the full picture, or am I missing something?
So taking a moment to question those automatic reactions and consider alternative perspectives.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness, rather than jumping to conclusions.
I love that. And this connects back to the idea of cultivating emptiness, right? By creating that space within ourselves, we can become more objective observers of our experiences.
You're exactly right. The more we can detach from our preconceived notions and judgments, the more clearly we can see the true nature of things.
This is all starting to paint a picture of a very different way of approaching life, one that is less reactive, more accepting, and ultimately more peaceful.
That's a great way to summarize it. And there's another key concept from Lizy that beautifully complements the idea of the relativity of perception, the illusion of control.
I'm ready to dive into that, but before we do, let's take a quick break and come back refreshed and ready to explore this next layer of Liza's wisdom. All right, we're back and, ready to continue our deep dive into the wisdom of Liza. Before the break, you're about to tell us about the illusion of control. And that's a concept that really hits home for me, especially in our modern world, where we're constantly bombarded with these messages about, productivity, goal setting, taking charge of your destiny, that whole thing.
Right. It's a very pervasive idea, but Liza really encourages us to question this assumption that we have as much control over our lives as we think we do. He suggests that much of what happens is beyond our control, influenced by so many different factors and circumstances that we can't fully grasp.
So it's not that we should just give up on setting goals or taking action, but rather that we should recognize kind of the limits of our control. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding that balance between taking responsibility for your actions and accepting that. You can't dictate every outcome.
That reminds me of the serenity prayer, Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Something like that.
Exactly, yeah. And Lizy's teachings align beautifully with that sentiment. He doesn't advocate for passivity, but rather for a more balanced and realistic approach to navigating life's uncertainties.
So instead of trying to micromanage every aspect of our lives, he's suggesting we kind of embrace a more adaptable and flexible mindset.
Precisely. And this leads us to one of the most intriguing and thought-provoking stories in the Lizy text, the butterfly dream.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this story earlier, and I have to admit it's been swirling around in my mind ever since. Could you tell us more about it and what Lizy's trying to convey through this particular tale?
Sure. It's a story that challenges our assumptions about reality and the nature of our own consciousness. In the story, a man dreams he's a butterfly, flitting from flower to flower, completely immersed in the experience of being a butterfly.
Oh, I can imagine how vivid and real that must have felt.
Exactly. But then he wakes up and he's left with this kind of lingering question. Am I a man who dreamt he was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming I am a man?
Whoa, yeah. That is a serious mind bender. It makes you question the very nature of your own identity and perception.
Exactly. And Lizy doesn't offer a definitive answer,
Yeah.
which is part of the story's brilliance. It leaves you pondering the nature of reality, the limits of our perception, and the possibility that things might not be as solid or fixed as we assume.
So he's not trying to give us a straightforward answer, but rather to open up our minds to different possibilities.
Precisely. He's encouraging us to question our assumptions, to embrace the mystery of existence, and to recognize that our perception of reality might be more fluid and subjective than we realize.
I'm starting to see how this story connects to the illusion of control. If we can't even be sure of our own identity or the nature of reality, then how can we possibly claim to have, complete control over our lives?
That's a great insight. The butterfly dream reminds us that life is full of mysteries and uncertainties. We might have plans and intentions, but ultimately, the universe unfolds in its own way, often taking us on those unexpected detours.
So it's about surrendering to the mystery, accepting that we don't have all the answers, and being open to the twists and turns that life throws our way.
Beautifully put. And this acceptance, rather than leading to despair or passivity, can actually be incredibly liberating.
I see how that could be the case. If you release the need to control everything, you also release the burden of that responsibility, right?
Exactly. And when we release that burden, we create space for more joy, spontaneity, and a deeper appreciation for the present moment.
This reminded me of another key theme that the Praxis Sophia episode highlighted, the acceptance of impermanence.
Yes, that's another crucial aspect of Lizy's teachings. He emphasizes the ever-changing nature of reality, encouraging us to embrace the flow of life, rather than clinging to fixed ideas or resisting those inevitable changes that come our way.
Yeah, I think this concept is especially relevant in today's world, where things are changing at an unprecedented pace. We're constantly bombarded with new information, technologies, societal shifts. It's a lot.
Right, it can feel overwhelming. But Lizy suggests that resisting this constant flux only creates more suffering.
Yeah, because it's a futile battle, right? I mean, change is the only constant, as they say.
Exactly. So instead of clinging to this illusion of permanence, Lizy encourages us to find peace and stability within ourselves amidst the ever-changing external world.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually do that? How can we cultivate that inner peace and stability when everything around us feels so uncertain and unpredictable?
Well, he suggests we turn to nature for guidance. Lizy was a very keen observer of the natural world and
Definitely.
saw profound wisdom in its cycles and rhythms.
That makes sense. Nature is constantly changing, yet there's also that underlying order and harmony to it all.
Precisely. And Lizy believed that by aligning ourselves with these natural principles, we could find a sense of peace and balance, even amidst the chaos of life.
That brings us back to the idea of wu-wei, doesn't it? Moving with the natural flow of life, like a river flowing effortlessly towards the sea.
You got it. And Praxis Sophia pointed out that Lizy really emphasizes the importance of harmony with nature, not just as a philosophical concept, but as a way of life.
So it's not just about appreciating the beauty of nature, but about actually learning from it
Yeah,
and applying its principles to our own lives.
exactly. And that brings us back to the story of Confucius and the swimmer. Remember how the swimmer navigated that raging river with such ease by just allowing himself to be carried by the current?
Yes, that story was a powerful illustration of how wu-wei can be applied in a very literal sense.
And it also speaks to this idea of harmony with nature. The swimmer doesn't fight the current, he understands its power and works with it, finding a path of least resistance.
Yeah, it's like he surrendered to the wisdom of the river, trusting that it will guide him to his destination.
Exactly. And Lai's eyes suggest that we can apply this same principle to our own lives. Instead of trying to force things to go our way, we can learn to observe, adapt, and move in harmony with the natural flow of events.
I can see how this would require a lot of trust, especially when we're facing, challenging circumstances.
It does. It requires us to surrender that illusion of control and to embrace a more kind of humble and receptive approach to life.
So how do we actually cultivate this harmony with nature in our modern lives?
Yeah.
It's easy to feel so disconnected from the natural world when we're surrounded by technology and concrete jungles.
Right. Well, it starts with awareness. Even small acts of noticing the natural world around you can make a difference, like paying attention to the changing seasons, the movement of the sun and moon, the growth of plants, even if it's just, a tree growing through a crack in the sidewalk.
So it's about making a conscious effort to reconnect with those natural rhythms, even those small ways.
Exactly. And from that awareness can come a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things, a sense of belonging to something larger than ourselves.
I love that. It's not just about observing nature, but about recognizing that we're a part of it, not separate from it.
Precisely. And this realization can be incredibly grounding and humbling, It can help us shift our perspective from one of dominance and control to one of respect and cooperation.
This is reminding me of another aspect of Lai Zai's teachings that Praxis Sophia mentioned, simplicity and detachment.
Yeah, those are essential themes in his philosophy as well. Lai recognized that much of our suffering comes from clinging to things,
Yeah.
possessions, status, outcomes, and constantly striving for more.
It's like we get caught up in this endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction.
Exactly. There's always something else to acquire, something else to achieve. But Lai suggests that true happiness and fulfillment come, not from external things, but from inner peace and contentment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But in today's consumer culture, it's easy to feel like your worth is tied to what you own or how much you achieve.
It's a constant challenge. But Lai reminds us that these external markers of success are ultimately fleeting and unsatisfying.
So he's not saying we need to renounce all our possessions and become hermits, but rather that we should shift our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment.
Yeah, that's the key. Detachment, in the context of Lai's teachings, doesn't mean rejecting the material world altogether. It's about not letting your happiness depend on it.
So it's about recognizing that true joy and contentment come from within, not from things outside of yourself.
Precisely. And this inner peace can be cultivated through practices like meditation, mindfulness, and simply appreciating those simple things in life.
So instead of constantly chasing after more, we can find fulfillment in the present moment, in the beauty of nature, and the connections we have with others.
Exactly. And this shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating. It frees us from the constant pressure to acquire, achieve, and compare ourselves to others.
I love that. It's about finding contentment and joy in the present moment, rather than constantly striving for something that always seems just out of reach.
And this leads us to another important aspect of Liza's teachings, cultivating a sense of gratitude.
Oh, that's a concept that I think we can all benefit from, especially in our fast-paced, often ungrateful world. How does Liza approach gratitude?
He emphasizes the importance of appreciating what we already have. Rather than focusing on what we lack, it's about recognizing the abundance that already exists in our lives, even in the midst of challenges or difficult circumstances.
I see how practicing gratitude could be a powerful antidote to that feeling of always wanting more, always feeling like something is missing.
It is. Gratitude helps us shift our focus from what we don't have to what we do have. And this simple shift in perspective can make a world of difference in our overall well-being.
So it's about training our minds to notice and appreciate the good things in our lives, big and small.
Exactly. It could be something as simple as appreciating a warm cup of tea, a beautiful sunset, or a kind gesture from a stranger.
It's about savoring those moments of joy and recognizing the blessings that we often take for granted.
Precisely. And the more we practice gratitude, the more we cultivate a sense of contentment and appreciation for the richness of our lives.
I'm starting to see how all these concepts we've been discussing, emptiness, effortless action, the relativity of perception, harmony with nature, simplicity, detachment, and gratitude, all weave together to create this kind of tapestry of wisdom that can guide us toward a more balanced and fulfilling way of life.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Liza's teachings offer a very holistic approach to navigating the complexities of human existence.
Yeah, it's not about following rigid rules or doctrines, but about embracing a set of principles that can help us live more consciously, more authentically, and more harmoniously with ourselves and the world around us.
And what's remarkable is how relevant these teachings remain today, even though they were developed, centuries ago. It speaks to the enduring wisdom of Liza's philosophy and its ability to address the timeless challenges of being human.
Absolutely. And Praxis Sophia does a great job of highlighting this enduring relevance, emphasizing how Liza's ideas can help us navigate the anxieties and uncertainties of our modern world.
It's like he anticipated the challenges we would face, that constant pressure to achieve, the feeling of being overwhelmed by information and choices, the disconnect from nature, and the relentless pursuit of more.
And instead of offering, quick fixes or easy answers, he offers a profound shift in perspective, a way of being in the world that prioritizes inner peace over external validation.
It's a philosophy that encourages us to let go of our rigid need for control, to embrace the natural flow of life, and to find contentment in simplicity and detachment.
So as we move towards wrapping up our deep dive into Liza's wisdom, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how we can bring these teachings into our daily lives. What are some practical steps we can take to integrate these principles into our everyday experiences?
Well, one of the most accessible and transformative practices, I think, is mindfulness. It's a simple yet profound way to cultivate the emptiness that Liza emphasizes.
You mentioned mindfulness earlier as a way to become more aware of our thoughts and emotions. Could you elaborate on how we can actually incorporate mindfulness into our daily routines?
Absolutely. Mindfulness is about bringing your attention to the present moment, without judgment. It's about noticing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise and pass away, without getting caught up in them.
So it's about cultivating a more objective and non-reactive awareness of our inner experience.
Exactly. And there are many ways to practice mindfulness. You can start with something as simple as paying attention to your breath for a few minutes each day. Notice the sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body.
It sounds so simple, but I can already feel myself getting distracted just thinking about it. My mind wants to jump ahead to the next thing, to plan, to worry.
That's completely normal. The mind is a wandering monkey, as they say. But the key is to simply notice those distractions and gently guide your attention back to the breath.
So it's about cultivating that muscle of attention, training ourselves to be more present and aware of what's happening within us and around us.
Precisely. And as you practice, you'll find that you're able to stay present for longer periods of time. And you'll start to notice the benefits in other areas of your life.
What kind of benefits are we talking about?
Well, mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress and anxiety, improve focus and concentration, and even enhance emotional regulation.
Wow. Those are some pretty significant benefits.
Yeah.
And it all starts with simply paying attention to your breath.
Yeah. It's amazing how such a simple practice can have such profound effects. And as you become more comfortable with mindfulness, you can start to incorporate it into other activities throughout your day.
Such as?
You can practice mindful walking, paying attention to the sensations of your feet on the ground, the movement of your body, the sights and sounds around you.
I love that. It's about bringing that same quality of presence and awareness to everyday activities.
Exactly. You can also practice mindful eating, savoring each bite of food, noticing the flavors and textures, and appreciating the nourishment it provides.
Yeah, I see how that would help you kind of slow down and appreciate your meals more fully.
It can also help you become more attuned to your body's signals of hunger and fullness, which can be beneficial for overall health and well-being.
So mindfulness is not just about, sitting on a cushion and meditating. It's about bringing that same quality of awareness to every aspect of your life.
Exactly. And as you integrate mindfulness into your daily routine, you'll start to experience the world in a richer, more nuanced way. You'll become more attuned to the subtle shifts in your inner landscape and more responsive to the needs of the present moment.
This is reminding me of the concept of effortless action, or wu wei. By cultivating this mindful awareness, it seems like we're creating the conditions for more harmonious and effortless action to kind of emerge.
You're exactly right. Mindfulness helps us let go of that rigid need for control and allows us to respond to situations with more clarity, wisdom, and ease.
So it's about cultivating a state of being where action flows naturally from a place of presence and awareness, rather than from a place of force or striving.
Beautifully put. And this aligns perfectly with Lai Zi's teachings on living in harmony with the natural flow of life.
I'm really starting to grasp the practical implications of these concepts and how they can be applied in our modern lives.
And there's so much more to explore. In Lai Zi's teachings, he delves into topics like the cultivation of virtue, the nature of true happiness, and the importance of living in accordance with the Tao, the underlying principle of all existence.
It sounds like a lifetime of study and practice, but I'm eager to continue this journey of discovery.
And I'm happy to guide you along the way.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'd like to pause and take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered so far. Lai Zi's teachings are full of wisdom and practical insights that can help us navigate the challenges of modern life with more grace and ease. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you consider to be the most valuable takeaway from Lai Zi's philosophy. If you had to choose one key principle that could have the greatest impact on someone's life, what would it be?
That's a great question. And it is hard to pick just one, but if I had to, I'd say it all comes back to cultivating that emptiness we talked about.
Okay, I see why you keep coming back to that. It does seem to underpin so much of Lai Zi's thinking.
Yeah, it's the foundation for so many of the other teachings. Remember, emptiness in this context isn't about being empty-headed. It's about creating that mental and emotional space where you can observe the world without, those prejudgments, those knee-jerk reactions.
So it's like clearing the mental clutter to make room for a fresh perspective.
Exactly. And from that place of spaciousness, you're better able to embrace the relativity of perception, to see that good and bad are often just labels we impose on events.
And that, in turn, makes it easier to accept impermanence, to go with the flow, like Lai Zi advises.
Precisely, when you're not clinging to how you think things should be, you're less resistant to change, more able to adapt, and that, I think, is the key to navigating the complexities of life with more grace and ease, which is what Lai Zi is all about.
It's funny, when we started this deep dive, I had this vague notion of Taoism as being all about retreating from the world and living as a hermit, but Lai Zi seems to be offering something much more practical.
Yeah, he's definitely not advocating for withdrawal from society. In fact, his teachings are very much about how to engage with the world skillfully, how to live a fulfilling life amidst the challenges and complexities of human existence.
And it's not about achieving some kind of perfect enlightened state. It's about making these small shifts in perspective, cultivating certain qualities of mind and heart.
That's what makes his teachings so accessible and relevant for us today. We don't have to become sages living on mountaintops to benefit from Lai Zi's wisdom. We can start right where we are in our everyday lives.
So for our listener out there who may be feeling a bit overwhelmed by all these concepts, where would you suggest they start? What's one tangible thing they can do today to bring a bit of Lai Zi's philosophy into their life?
I'd suggest starting with a simple mindfulness practice. Even 5 minutes a day of focusing on your breath can make a difference.
And that ties back to the emptiness idea, right?
Exactly. It's about creating that inner space, quieting the mental chatter, so you can observe your thoughts and emotions without getting swept away by them.
And from that place of stillness, you might find it easier to apply some of Lai Zi's other principles.
Absolutely. You might notice those moments when you're clinging to control or judging an event as bad before you see the whole picture. Mindfulness gives you that pause button, that ability to choose a different response.
I love that it's not about becoming some perfect, detached being. It's about cultivating awareness and making conscious choices.
Exactly. And remember, even Lizai acknowledged that life is full of, ups and downs, challenges and joys. It's not about erasing those experiences, but about navigating them with more wisdom and equanimity.
So what we're taking away from this deep dive into Lai Zi is not a set of rigid rules, but a framework for approaching life with more flexibility, acceptance, and a sense of wonder.
I couldn't have put it better myself. It's about embracing the flow of life, trusting the process, and finding moments of peace and joy amidst the chaos.
I think that's a great note to end on. A huge thank you to you for guiding us through this fascinating exploration of Lai Zi's wisdom. I feel like I've gained some valuable insights that I can apply to my own life.
It was my pleasure, and remember, this is just the beginning. If Lizy's teachings resonate with you, I encourage you to delve deeper into his work. There's a wealth of wisdom waiting to be discovered.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore Lai Zi's teachings for yourselves. Remember, even small shifts in perspective can have a profound impact on how you experience the world. So until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, keep diving deep.